She was sitting on the floor of the hospital waiting room with her back against the wall and a library book open across her knees when the man in the black coat walked past her for the third time without looking down. Most adults didn't look down. Maya had noticed that years ago, before she could have explained what she'd noticed or why it mattered. Adults looked forward, or at their phones, or at other adults who were approximately their own size. Children were below the level of the gaze, the same way the floor was below the level of the gaze, present, structural, taken for granted. You only looked at the floor when you dropped something. She was 8 years old. She had deep brown eyes, skin the color of warm cedar, and hair that her grandmother Loretta braided into 2 thick plaits every Sunday, and which, by Wednesday, had usually started working its way loose on the left side, no matter how tight the rubber band was. She was small even for 8, the kind of small that made adults say things like, "Aren't you tiny?" in the tone that meant they were talking about her like she wasn't there. She wore the same green jacket to school every day, the one with the broken zipper that she kept closed by holding the 2 sides together with her left hand when the wind was cold. The book on her knees was a neuroscience textbook, not a children's book about the brain, not the kind with cartoon neurons holding hands and speech bubbles that said signals travel at amazing speeds. This was a real textbook, the kind with dense columns of small print and grayscale diagrams of spinal cross-sections, the kind that usually lived in the reference section of a university library and that the Baltimore City Public Library on Orleans Street had for some reason shelved in the general stacks. Maya had checked it out 3 weeks ago. She'd renewed it twice. She was on page 214. She didn't understand every word. She understood more than anyone would expect. The waiting room was on the 4th floor of Johns Hopkins Hospital in Baltimore, Maryland, one of the most famous medical institutions in the world, a place where doctors came from 40 countries to train and where researchers published findings that changed the way medicine was practiced on 6 continents. The floors were clean linoleum, the color of pale sand. The chairs were padded in a blue that wasn't quite comfortable and wasn't quite uncomfortable. There was a water fountain near the elevator that had a small paper cup dispenser mounted beside it, and Maya had taken exactly 2 cups of water since she and Grandma Loretta arrived at 9 in the morning. It was now 3:15 in the afternoon. Grandma Loretta was asleep in the chair 2 seats down, her chin dropped toward her chest, her reading glasses still on her face. She worked 2 jobs, mornings at a laundromat on North Avenue and evenings answering phones for a security company, and she slept when she could, wherever she could, without apology. She was 61 years old and her feet hurt most days, and she raised Maya and Maya's older brother Deshaun by herself in a 2-bedroom apartment in East Baltimore because their mother had died when Maya was 3, and their father had been gone since before that. They were at Johns Hopkins because Grandma Loretta had an appointment with a neurologist. Her hands shook sometimes. It had started with the right hand about a year ago. Small tremors, barely visible, the kind you might mistake for being cold, and had gotten enough worse in the last 3 months that she'd finally let the doctor at the community health clinic refer her somewhere for a real answer. The neurologist had looked at her, asked questions, done tests, and scheduled a follow-up that was today, and that follow-up was the appointment that would deliver whatever the answer was. Grandma Loretta had not told Maya or Deshaun what she was afraid the answer might be. But Maya had been reading a neuroscience textbook for 3 weeks. She hadn't told Grandma Loretta that part either. The man in the black coat was on his 4th pass now, and Maya had begun studying him the way she studied everything that didn't make sense at first. He was tall, very tall, with the kind of build that looked like it had once been athletic and now was just solid. His coat was expensive in a way that was different from the expensive things she saw in advertisements, which tended to have visible logos. His coat had no logo. The expense was in the quality of the fabric, the way it moved when he walked. He was Arab, she thought. She recognized the features from the family that ran the corner store on her block and from some of her classmates at school. He wore a watch that she had looked at long enough to notice probably cost more than Grandma Loretta made in a year. He was not waiting for a doctor. He was looking for something or someone. He was also, she noticed, upset in the way that powerful people get upset. Not loudly, not visibly, but in the tightness around the jaw and the particular speed of the walk. The speed that says I have resources and none of them are fixing this. Maya looked back down at her book. On the page in front of her was a diagram of the cervical spine, the 7 vertebrae of the neck, labeled C1 through C7, with the spinal cord running through them like a wire through a pipe. There was a shaded region around C4 and C5 with a caption that read, "Lesions at the C4-C5 level typically result in tetraplegia with variable preservation of shoulder function." There were footnotes that led to 3 other chapters, and she had read 2 of them. She had found the textbook by accident. She had been looking for something to help her understand Grandma Loretta's condition, and the library search had taken her somewhere unexpected, and one book had led to another the way books do when you follow them with genuine curiosity. She had not found what she was looking for about Grandma Loretta, but she had found something else. She had found it 3 days ago, in the form of a different article, a printed research paper that a medical student had left in the library, tucked between the pages of a journal issue as a bookmark, and then apparently forgotten when they returned the journal. Maya had found it when she flipped through the journal looking for something to read while she waited for Grandma Loretta to finish a phone call. She had unfolded it, started reading it out of habit, and then not put it down for 45 minutes. The article was about a treatment, a new protocol, something called epidural stimulation combined with a specific drug regimen in patients with spinal cord injuries at the C4-C5 level within a particular time window after the injury. The results were, the article said in the careful language of medical research, clinically significant in a subset of patients previously considered to have permanent complete lesions. Permanent. Complete. Those were the words the doctors were supposed to use about these injuries. The article was suggesting that, in some cases, at the right time, those words might not be the final words. She had read it 4 times. She had gone back to the textbook to understand the parts she didn't understand. She had made notes on the back of a grocery receipt that she found in Grandma Loretta's coat pocket. She was 8 years old. She was sitting on the floor of a hospital waiting room. She was still not sure what to do with what she knew. The man in the black coat stopped. He stopped 6 feet away from her and stood with his phone in his hand, looking at it with the expression of someone who had read the same message too many times and it kept saying the same thing. Then he put the phone in his pocket and looked up, and for a moment, the first time all day, he looked down. He looked directly at Maya. She looked directly back. He looked at the textbook. There was a pause. "That's a strange book for a waiting room," he said. His English was clear and precise, with an accent she couldn't quite place but recognized as the kind that came from someone who had learned English as an adult and learned it so thoroughly that it had become native in function if not in origin. "It's from the library," Maya said. "I can see that." He looked at the spine. Principles of Clinical Neuroscience. 3rd edition. "The 4th edition has a better chapter on spinal cord injuries," Maya said, "but the library only has the 3rd. He looked at her differently now, not with the look adults usually gave her, the look that assessed age and size and made decisions accordingly, but with the look that meant something had not gone as expected. "How old are you?" he asked. 8, Maya said. "How old are you?" That caught him off guard. Something shifted in his expression, not offense, but the faint flicker of something that might, under very different circumstances, have been amusement. 44, he said. "Are you waiting for a doctor?" He was quiet for a moment. Then, "My daughter is a patient here." Maya looked at him. She thought about the article in her backpack. She thought about the notes on the grocery receipt. She thought about 3 weeks of reading that she hadn't been sure what to do with until this exact moment. "What's wrong with her?" Maya asked. He was quiet for longer this time. Adults usually didn't answer that question from strangers, especially strangers who were 8, but something in the directness of it, or something in the book she was holding, kept him from walking away. "She was in an accident," he said finally. 4 weeks ago. She broke her neck. The doctors say she may never move below her shoulders again." Maya was very still. "C4, C5, she said. He stared at her. "The injury," Maya said. "Is it at the C4, C5 level?" The man in the black coat looked at the 8-year-old girl sitting on the floor with the neuroscience textbook across her knees, and something happened in his face that was hard to describe, the very specific expression of a person who has been expecting nothing and encountered something. "Yes," he said. Maya reached into her backpack. "Before we go any further, tell me in the comments where in the world you're watching this from. I want to know." His name was Tariq al-Sayed. He was the founder and managing director of Al Sayed Capital, one of the largest private investment funds operating out of Dubai, with significant holdings in healthcare real estate across North America. He was, by any measure that the financial world used to take measure, extraordinarily successful, the kind of successful that involves private aviation and personal assistance, and a security team that had been politely asked to wait downstairs because the hospital had a policy and because Tariq had said, with a finality his team recognized, that he needed to walk. He had been walking the 4th floor of Johns Hopkins for 3 hours. His daughter's name was Noor. She was 19 years old. She had been studying marine biology at the University of Miami when the accident happened. A car crash on I-95 6 weeks ago, a driver who ran a red light, a collision at 45 miles an hour that physics resolved in the way physics always resolves these things, without consultation and without mercy. Noor had been in the passenger seat. She had not been wearing her seatbelt because she had been turning to reach for her water bottle in the back seat. That specific, ordinary to forgettable motion, reaching back for a water bottle, had determined the angle of impact. The injury was C4-C5, incomplete on the left side, complete on the right. She had been in the ICU for 2 weeks, then transferred to the spinal care unit, then brought here to Hopkins, because Tariq had spent 48 hours on the phone with every contact he had in American medicine, and Hopkins had the best spinal cord injury unit in the country, and he had arranged a private room and a team of 4 specialists, and he was paying for every single thing in cash because the idea of waiting for insurance approvals, waiting for administrative processes, waiting for anything, felt, in those early days, physically intolerable. He had been here for 3 weeks. His assistants brought him reports from the fund. He signed what needed signing and delegated what could be delegated and otherwise existed entirely within the radius of this hospital, this floor, this corridor, that he had walked so many times he could close his eyes and describe every door. The specialists had been, without exception, excellent, thorough, and honest in the way that distinguished physicians at elite institutions are honest, with precision and without cruelty. But honestly, the consensus was clear. The injury was severe. The complete lesion on the right side was, in the language they used carefully, unlikely to resolve. The incomplete lesion on the left offered some hope for limited recovery with intensive rehabilitation. They were recommending a long-term rehabilitation plan, a transition to a specialized spinal cord injury facility, and a conversation about adaptive technology and quality of life adjustments. Tariq had heard the word adjustment 11 times in 3 weeks. He kept count. He did not want to adjust. He wanted to find the thing that would make adjustment unnecessary. He understood, rationally, that this was not always possible. He understood it the way you understand things that you have accepted intellectually, but that your gut refuses to receive. So he walked, and he called people, and he read reports that his assistant sent him from research databases, and he reached on over and over for the phone and then put it back, because there was no one left to call who hadn't already been called. And then he looked down, and there was a small girl on the floor of the waiting room holding a neuroscience textbook, and she said C4-C5 with the casual precision of someone identifying a bus route, and he was standing very still, and she was reaching into her backpack. She pulled out a folded piece of paper, not a notebook, not a printed article, a grocery receipt, the back of which was covered in tiny, extremely neat handwriting in pencil. She unfolded it and held it out to him. He took it, he read it. His expression, which had been the controlled expression of a man who had been managing himself for weeks, went through several things in the space of about 10 seconds. The receipt listed, in the handwriting that was clearly the child's, the name of an article: epidural electrical stimulation, combined with pharmacological modulation in chronic and subacute spinal cord injury, a multi-center trial, followed by a journal name, a date, and a page range. Below that, in slightly smaller writing, were 3 bullet points. Works best within 8-week window after injury. She's at 6 weeks. Still inside. Requires partial surgical decompression first if residual pressure at C4-C5. Check her imaging. Left side incomplete lesion. Better candidate than complete-only patients. He looked up from the receipt. Maya was watching him with the patient attention of someone accustomed to waiting for people to process things. "Where did you get this?" he asked. "I found the article at the library. Someone left it between the pages of a journal. I read it. It seemed like it might help." "You read a clinical research article?" "I've been reading about spinal cord injuries for a few weeks," Maya said. "I was actually researching something else, but I found this. And then I saw you walking, and you looked like you were looking for something. And then you told me your daughter had a neck injury and—" She paused. "I have notes." Tariq looked down at the grocery receipt in his hand. He looked at the girl. He looked at the textbook. There was a voice in the back of his mind. The voice of 44 years of experience, of a world that had trained him to understand where knowledge came from and what credentials it required. And that voice said, "This is a child. This is an 8-year-old child. This is not information." There was another voice, quieter, that had been growing louder for 6 weeks. "Your daughter has been inside that room for 3 weeks, and the experts have all said the same thing. How much does the source matter when you have nothing else?" "You're 8 years old," he said. "Yes," Maya said. "Where do you go to school?" "Dunbar Elementary, on Federal Street." He knew the school. It was in East Baltimore. It was not, by the standards he applied to most things, a school that produced children who read clinical neuroscience research. "Why are you reading this?" he asked, gesturing at the textbook. "My grandmother has a tremor," Maya said. "I was trying to figure out what it means. The neurology section in the textbook was confusing, so I started reading other parts to understand the context. The spinal cord chapter was next, and then I found the article. Your grandmother brought you here. She has an appointment with the neurologist today. She's sleeping." Maya glanced at Grandma Loretta 2 seats down, then back at Tariq. "She doesn't know about the article. I'm still thinking about whether to tell her." He stood there for a long moment. He was not a man who stood still easily. The walk, the phone calls, the constant motion were how he managed the part of himself that could not accept stillness. But he stood still now. "What's your name?" he said. Maya Collins." Maya. He looked at the receipt again. The handwriting was careful and deliberate. The handwriting of someone who wrote slowly and meant each letter. The information on it was specific and, he noted, apparently accurate. He recognized the journal name, and the patient population description matched what he'd been told about Noor's classification. "You said it works best within 8 weeks. She's at 6 weeks. 6 weeks and 3 days, Maya said. "I didn't know when the injury happened exactly, but I heard one of the nurses say 6 weeks of this morning when I was walking past the hallway." He blinked. "You were listening to a conversation about my daughter." "I wasn't trying to," Maya said. "I was going to the water fountain. The door was open. I heard 6 weeks and C4, C5, and I thought about the article." He stood there. "You're standing in a hospital hallway talking to a stranger because you overheard a detail through a door and connected it to something you read at the library," he said. "I thought it might help," Maya said simply. "If it doesn't help, you can give me back the receipt." Tariq al-Sayed looked at Maya Collins for a long time. He was thinking about something. She could see it in the particular quality of his stillness, the way the expression moved through several phases without settling. He was not dismissing her. He was also not sure what he was doing. He was a man who made decisions based on analysis and evidence, and who was currently holding a grocery receipt written on by an 8-year-old and weighing it against 6 weeks of briefings from distinguished physicians. "The article," he said. "Do you have the actual article?" "It's at the library. I could get it tomorrow." "The library is closed on Sunday." "I could write down enough that you could find it yourself," Maya said. "I have the full title and the author names and the journal and the year. That's enough to find it in a hospital database." "You know what a hospital database is." "I know what a database is," Maya said. "I looked up what kind of databases hospitals use last week. Johns Hopkins has access to PubMed and several others. You probably know someone who could search it." Tariq was quiet for a long moment. Then he did something unexpected. He sat down, not in one of the padded waiting room chairs, on the floor against the wall 4 feet from Maya, in the posture of a man setting aside, for a moment, the version of himself that stood upright in black coats and commanded rooms. Grandma Loretta, 2 seats down, slept on. "Tell me what the article says," he said. Maya closed the textbook and began to explain. She explained for 22 minutes. She explained the mechanism, how the spinal cord injury had interrupted communication between the brain and the muscles below, but that interruption was not the same as destruction. That, in patients with incomplete or partially incomplete lesions, circuits below the injury level often remained intact, waiting for a signal that could no longer reach them. She explained the protocol, the epidural stimulation device placed surgically at the level of the injury, delivering precisely calibrated electrical impulses that bypassed the damaged tissue and went directly to those waiting circuits. She explained the pharmacological component, a drug regimen that primed the nervous system to respond to the electrical signals more efficiently. She explained the time window, the fact that in the weeks immediately following a spinal cord injury, the nervous system went through phases of response and reorganization, and that the window of maximum receptivity for this particular intervention appeared to close at approximately 8 weeks, after which the nervous system began consolidating around the injury in ways that made reactivation more difficult. She explained the patient profile, that the best candidates were patients with at least partial incomplete lesion on one side, which preserved enough circuitry to respond to stimulation. She explained that Noor, based on what she'd gathered from the overheard detail and from Tariq's own confirmation, appeared to match the candidate profile. She explained all of this in the vocabulary of an 8-year-old who had been reading clinical neuroscience for 3 weeks, which meant she got some of the terminology slightly wrong, and sometimes paused to rephrase when she noticed his expression indicating she'd misstated something, and once stopped and said, "I'm not sure I'm saying this right, but the idea is..." Before continuing with the idea, which was right, Tariq did not interrupt her once. When she finished, he was quiet for a full minute. Not the quiet of dismissal, the quiet of genuine processing. "How do you know the article is accurate?" he asked. "I don't know for certain," Maya said. "I know it was published in a journal and that it had a lot of authors and that the patients they studied were real patients, not made up. I know that what it says about how spinal cord injuries work matches what the textbook says. I know that my grandmother says that good information feels different from bad information when you read it carefully enough." She paused. "I think it's accurate, but I'm 8 and I've been reading about this for 3 weeks, so you should have a real doctor look at it." "That's a very reasonable qualification," Tariq said. "I know," Maya said. Another quiet moment. Then he said, "Why are you doing this?" She thought about it. It was a fair question. She had been wondering something similar herself for the past 3 days. Why she had kept thinking about the article, why she had carried the notes in her backpack, why she had been watching this particular man in this particular waiting room instead of just reading her book. "Because it's possible that it could help, and you might not have found it yet," she said. "And it seemed wrong to know something that might help someone and not say it, even to a stranger. Even to a stranger." He looked at her for a long time. "My daughter's name is Noor," he said. "She's 19. She was studying marine biology. Before the accident, she used to send me videos of the fish she was learning to identify. I don't know anything about marine biology. I used to watch those videos 3 times each so I'd have something to say when she called." Maya listened. "She hasn't sent me any videos in 6 weeks," he said. "She's allowed her phone. She just doesn't." He was quiet. "I think she's scared," Maya said. "I think so too. Can I meet her?" He looked at her. It was a startling thing to ask, and he seemed startled, which surprised Maya because she'd thought it was a natural next step. "You want to meet my daughter? I want to tell her about the article," Maya said. "Adults tell other adults things, but sometimes people your age don't really hear things the same way when another adult says them. She might hear it differently from me." Tariq al-Sayed looked at Maya Collins, 8 years old, green jacket with the broken zipper, library book at her side. For a long moment. "You might be right," he said. "Dr." Patricia Osei had been the director of the spinal cord injury program at Johns Hopkins for 11 years. She had her medical degree from Yale, her residency at UCSF, and a fellowship in neurorehabilitation from the Karolinska Institute in Stockholm. She had published over 60 papers. She had treated hundreds of patients with spinal cord injuries, ranging from mild to catastrophic, and she had developed, over those 11 years and those hundreds of patients, a capacity to read families, to sense the combination of grief and hope and desperation that presented differently in every room but shared a common grammar. She had seen Tariq Al-Sayed every day for 3 weeks. She understood him precisely. What she had not anticipated was walking into the family consultation room on a Sunday afternoon to find him sitting at the table across from an 8-year-old girl in a green jacket, with a grocery receipt on the table between them and a neuroscience textbook propped open beside it. She stopped in the doorway. "Mr. Al-Sayed," she said carefully, "I'm sorry, I wasn't aware you had a—" She looked at Maya. "A visitor." "This is Maya," Tariq said. "She has some information I'd like you to look at." Dr. Osei looked at him. She was very good at reading situations, and this one was taking a moment. "Information. There's an article," Maya said, "about epidural stimulation combined with pharmacological priming in C4-C5 patients within the 8-week window. I found it at the library. I have the citation." She slid the grocery receipt across the table. Dr. Osei picked it up. She read it. Her expression was professional and therefore well controlled. But there was a small thing that happened around the eyes, a microsecond of something that might, if you were watching closely, have been recognition. She looked up. "Where did you find this?" "Someone left the printed article in a library journal. I read it. The title and authors are on the receipt. You should be able to find the full article in PubMed." "I know what PubMed is," Dr. Osei said, and there was something in her voice that was not quite dry amusement, but was adjacent to it. "I know you know," Maya said. "I said that for Mr. Al-Sayed's benefit." Tariq made a sound. Dr. Osei looked at him. He cleared his throat. "The article," he said, "is it legitimate?" Dr. Osei set the receipt down. She sat. She was thinking, and she let herself think visibly for a moment, which was not something she typically did in family consultations. "The research program this references, I know it. It's the joint work out of Louisville and a consortium in Europe. They've been publishing on this for about 2 years. She paused. "It's not mainstream protocol yet. The evidence base is real, but the replication is still limited, and there are considerable risks with the surgical component." "But it's real," Tariq said. "The research is real. Whether it applies to Noor specifically is a clinical question." "Does Noor fit the patient profile?" Maya asked. Dr. Osei looked at her for a long moment. "You understand what the patient profile involves. Partially incomplete lesion on at least one side, injury within the treatment window, no contraindications for the surgical component. The left side lesion is incomplete, right? That's what I understood from Mr. Al-Sayed." "You understood correctly." Another pause. "The left side is incomplete. That is, in fact, the profile that has responded best in the trial data." She was quiet. "This is not something I would typically be discussing with someone my age," Maya said. "I know, but Mr. Al-Sayed asked you to come, and he's Noor's father, and he has the right to know about all of the options." Dr. Osei looked at Maya for a full moment of assessment that Maya met without difficulty. "Where do you go to school?" she asked. "Dunbar Elementary." A brief pause. "How did you come to be reading clinical neuroscience research?" "My grandmother has a neurological condition, and I was trying to understand it. Then I found this article by accident, and I thought it was important." Maya paused. "Am I wrong?" Dr. Osei was quiet for a long moment. Then she said something that surprised everyone in the room, including herself. "No," she said, "you're not wrong." The conversation that followed lasted 2 hours. Dr. Osei called a colleague, Dr. James Whitfield, the attending neurosurgeon on Noor's case, and he came in from home on a Sunday afternoon, which was the kind of thing that happened when Patricia Osei called and said it was necessary. He arrived to find the director of the spinal cord injury program sitting at a table with an 8-year-old and a Saudi billionaire, going through a printed copy of a research article that someone had retrieved from the hospital database while Dr. Osei and Maya waited. Dr. Whitfield looked at the article. He looked at Maya. He looked at Dr. Osei, whose expression said, "I know. Walk me through what she told you," he said to Tariq. Tariq repeated what Maya had explained in the waiting room. Maya corrected him twice, gently, specifically on the pharmacological timing component and on the mechanism of circuit reactivation, and each correction was accurate. Dr. Whitfield read the article. He asked Maya 3 questions about the patient profile criteria. She answered 2 correctly from memory and said, "I don't know," to the third, which he later confirmed he'd asked precisely because it was the most technically obscure detail, and the fact that she knew her own limit on it was, he later told Dr. Osei, as impressive as the answers she'd gotten right. At the end of 2 hours, Dr. Whitfield set the article down. "Noor's profile is consistent with the trial candidates," he said carefully. "The time window is narrow. We have, if we're going to move on this, approximately 18 days before we pass the outer boundary of the intervention period described in the literature." "The outer boundary is week 8, Maya said. "She's at 6 weeks and 3 days. "Correct." He looked at her. "You've been keeping track." "Since this morning." He was quiet. "Is it possible?" Tariq asked. Dr. Whitfield looked at Dr. Osei. Something passed between them, the compressed communication of experienced colleagues who have worked together long enough to have a shared language of glances. Then he looked back at Tariq. "The surgical component carries significant risk," he said. "The decompression procedure at C4-C5 in a patient 6 weeks post-injury, it's not without precedent, but it's not routine. The recovery period is difficult. And I want to be honest with you, this is not a guaranteed path to recovery. The trial data shows meaningful outcomes in a subset of patients. It does not show universal outcomes." "What does meaningful mean?" Tariq asked. "Recovered voluntary movement in the upper extremities. In the best cases, significant sensory return in parts of the torso. In the stronger cases in the trial, some limited lower extremity response." He paused. "No cases of complete recovery to pre-injury status." Tariq was quiet. "But something," Maya said softly, almost to herself. "Something instead of nothing." Dr. Whitfield looked at her. He had been practicing medicine for 23 years, and he had sat across from a great many people at a great many consequential tables. And he had never sat across from an 8-year-old who said something instead of nothing in that particular tone, not with childlike simplicity, but with the weight of someone who understood what they were saying. "Yes," he said quietly, "something instead of nothing." The conversation with Noor happened the next morning. Tariq had asked Maya, and Maya had asked Grandma Loretta, and Grandma Loretta had looked at Maya for a long moment, with the look she reserved for the moments when she understood that her granddaughter had once again done something she hadn't been fully told about, and then she'd said, "All right," in the tone that meant both yes and we will talk about this later. Noor al-Sayed's room was on the same floor, the 4th floor, where the spinal cord unit was. It was a private room, larger than the standard rooms, with a window that faced east and caught the morning light over the Baltimore skyline. She had a motorized bed that could be adjusted to multiple positions. She had family photos on the small table near the window, a beach somewhere, probably Miami, she and 2 friends laughing at something outside the frame. She had a phone she wasn't using and a tablet propped on an arm mount that was paused on a nature documentary. She was 19 years old. She had her father's strong features and her own particular expression, which at rest defaulted to something that was slightly guarded, the expression of someone who had recently learned to expect things to be worse than advertised. She looked at Maya when Maya came in with a raised eyebrow that said, "Explain this." "My dad sent in an 8-year-old, Noor said. "He didn't send me," Maya said. "I asked to come." She looked around the room, then at Noor. "Do you mind if I sit?" "Go ahead." Noor watched her pull the chair close to the bed. "You're the one who found the article." "Yes." "He told me about it." Noor looked at the ceiling for a moment, then back down. Her voice was controlled in the way that things are controlled, when a lot of energy is being directed toward the control. "Why are you here?" Maya was quiet for a moment. Then, "Because I wanted to tell you about it myself. Not because I think my dad and my Mr. Al-Sayed explained it wrong, but because I thought it might be different hearing it from me." "Why would it be different?" "Because I'm not trying to fix you," Maya said. "Your dad is trying to fix you. The doctors are trying to fix you. I'm just someone who found something at the library and thought you should know." Noor was quiet. Something had shifted slightly in her expression. "What did you find?" she said. Maya told her. She told her everything she told Tariq and Dr. Osei and Dr. Whitfield, but she told it differently. Not as a clinical briefing, not as a proposal, not as an argument to be won. She told it as, "Here is a thing that exists. Here is what it says. Here is the time and the person and the question." She told her about the circuits below the injury that might still be intact, waiting. She used, for the first time with anyone, a word she hadn't planned to use. She said they were like fish in deep water that nobody had dropped a line to yet. She didn't know why she said it that way. Maybe because she'd seen the marine biology photos. Noor's eyes did something small when she said it. It's not a guarantee, Maya said. Dr. Whitfield was very clear about that. I know, Noor said. My dad told me. But the window is closing, Maya said. 18 days. If you want to try it. There's still time. After 18 days, the article says the window is mostly closed. Noor was quiet for a long time. The morning light came in through the east window and lay across the bed in the particular way that hospital light does in the mornings, neutral and clear. I haven't moved anything below my shoulders in 6 weeks, Noor said, not to Maya specifically, just out loud, as if checking to make sure the fact was still true. I know, Maya said. So 6 weeks of nothing, and you're telling me there might be, something, Maya said. Not everything. Something. Noor looked at her. Her expression had come undone slightly from its controlled state, not falling apart, but loosened, more like her actual face. Why do you care? She asked. You don't know me. Maya thought about this. It was the same question her grandmother's friend Miss Rosa had asked once about something else entirely. Why do you care about things that aren't yours to carry? Because 6 weeks ago you were watching fish in Miami, Maya said, and I read an article that said there might be a way back to something, and it seemed wrong not to tell you. Noor looked at the ceiling again. She was quiet for a full minute. Then she said, Go get my dad. The surgery happened on a Thursday. Dr. Whitfield had spent 4 days consulting with 2 colleagues from the consortium that had published the original research, one at the University of Louisville, one from a rehabilitation hospital in Amsterdam, running the details of Noor's case against the trial parameters. The answer that came back from both was careful but not discouraging. She was a candidate. The incomplete lesion on the left side created the circuitry profile that had responded best in the trial population. The decompression procedure was feasible. The risks were real and significant, and needed to be clearly understood and accepted. Tariq had listened to the risks with the silence of a man in the process of making an irreversible decision. Noor had listened with her eyes open and her hands still at her sides, and at the end she had said, I want to try. The surgery lasted 5 hours and 40 minutes. Tariq spent it in a waiting room 2 floors down with his assistant Dawood, who had flown in from Dubai specifically because Tariq had not wanted to be alone. Dawood was a quiet man who had been with Tariq for 12 years and who understood by this point when speech was needed and when presence was the thing. He sat beside Tariq and did not speak, and was exactly what was needed. Maya was not there for the surgery. She was at school. She didn't find out how it went until the afternoon, when Tariq called the number he had asked her for, and Grandma Loretta answered, and passed the phone to Maya with a look that said she was still processing all of this. It went well, Tariq said. Dr. Whitfield said the decompression was complete. He said the tissue response was encouraging. Maya let out a breath she didn't remember holding. Further stimulation protocol starts in 10 days, Tariq said, when the surgical site has healed sufficiently. That's what the article said, Maya said. 10 to 14 days post-decompression before beginning stimulation. Yes, a pause. She asked about you. Noor? She asked whether you were going to come back. Maya thought about this. I could come on Saturday. If my grandma can bring me, I can send a car, Tariq said. That's okay, Maya said. My grandma's car works fine. There was a brief pause on the line, and then Tariq made a sound that was so unexpected, soft, startled, genuine, that Maya almost didn't recognize it as a laugh. The stimulation sessions began 10 days after the surgery, using a device that the Hopkins team had worked with a medical technology company to expedite, cutting through the usual timeline with a combination of institutional authority and, Maya suspected, Tariq's financial influence, though she didn't ask about that part. The first 3 sessions showed nothing. That was expected. The article had been clear that initial response was rarely immediate. Maya knew this. She'd told Tariq this. He had nodded and said he understood and then called her the morning after each session anyway. Nothing today, he said after the first. I know, Maya said. Nothing today, he said after the second. I know, Maya said. After the third he called and was quiet for a moment before speaking. Dr. Osi said this is normal. It is normal, Maya said. The article says median response onset is session 4 to 6. You've memorized the article. I've read it about 12 times, Maya said. I memorize things when I read them a lot. He was quiet a moment. Is that something you've always done? Yes, Maya said. It used to annoy my teachers because I would correct things sometimes. Now mostly they just give me harder books. The fourth session was on a Tuesday afternoon. Tariq called Maya at 4:30. Grandma Loretta was making dinner, and the apartment smelled like onions and the particular warmth of a small kitchen in the early evening, and Maya picked up the phone and said hello, and heard something in the quality of Tariq's silence, not the silence of nothing, but a different silence. She moved her right index finger. He said. Maya sat down on the couch. Voluntarily, she said. Dr. Osei said it 3 times, voluntarily. She asked Noor to do it again. She did it again. She did it 5 times. Maya was quiet. Are you there? Tariq asked. I'm here, Maya said. Her voice sounded slightly different to her own ears, slightly pressurized, the way it got when she was trying not to show something. That's consistent with the article. The right side with complete lesion sometimes shows response after stimulation because the circuits are intact, just disconnected. The finger is the most distal. She stopped. That's really good, she said. Yes, he said. It is. A pause. Maya, he said. I want you to know something. What? When you gave me that receipt in the waiting room, I almost walked away. I had to decide, in that moment, whether to take what an 8-year-old told me seriously, and I almost didn't. I know, Maya said. How do you know? Because I watched you decide, she said. You had that look for a minute, like you were trying to find the polite way to leave, and then you didn't. He was quiet. What made you think I might listen? Maya considered this honestly. Because you were walking in circles, she said. People who have already accepted something don't walk in circles. You were still looking. I thought if you were still looking, you might be willing to look at something unusual. The sound that came down the phone was something Maya couldn't quite categorize. Not laugh, not cry, something in the space between the two. The weeks that followed built slowly, in the uneven and unpredictable way that genuine recovery builds. Not a straight line upward, but a jagged, irregular progression, 2 steps forward and 1 step back, and sometimes 3 steps forward, and then a plateau that lasted 10 days and felt like regression but wasn't. Nor recovered voluntary movement in 3 fingers of the right hand within the first 2 weeks of stimulation. Then the wrist, then, more slowly, partial movement in the right forearm. The left side, with its incomplete lesion, responded faster. By week 4 she had meaningful movement in the entire left arm and was working daily with a physical therapist, Keisha Washington, who had been on Noor's case since the beginning and who told Dr. Osei privately that she had rarely seen a patient work as hard. The legs remained largely unresponsive. There were, at week 6 of stimulation, faint signals, small, involuntary movements that the monitoring equipment caught, and the trial data categorized as positive indicators for potential future response with continued therapy. Dr. Whitfield was careful to describe these as preliminary. He used the word uncertain more than he used the word promising, but something was happening, something that had not been happening before. Tariq was in Baltimore for all of it. He had, in the weeks since the surgery, made a decision that his fund could manage without him physically present, that Dawood and the senior partners were fully capable of the day-to-day, and that there was exactly one place he needed to be. The investors who called about quarterly reviews were told he was managing a family matter. They were not told more than that. On a Saturday 6 weeks into the stimulation protocol, Maya came to the hospital with Grandma Loretta, who sat with Tariq in the family lounge over tea while Maya went to see Noor. This had become, quietly and without any formal arrangement, a regular thing. Noor was sitting up in the bed when Maya came in, really sitting up, which was something that had required full mechanical assistance 6 weeks ago, and now required partial support from a prop pillow, the muscles in her upper back beginning to remember how to hold her. She had her phone in her left hand, which she set down when Maya came in. I was watching a video, Noor said. What kind? Fish. She said it with the slight self-consciousness of someone who has rediscovered something they thought they had left behind. From the reef off Key Largo. This guy I follow makes these 15-minute videos where he just swims along and doesn't say anything, just the underwater sounds. I used to watch them to fall asleep. I hadn't watched one since." She stopped. "Since the accident," Maya said. "Since the accident." Noor looked at her phone for a moment. "I watched 3 last night. I don't know why last night specifically." Maya sat in her usual chair. She thought she might know why last night specifically, but she didn't say it. Some things worked better when they were discovered than explained. "How's the physical therapy going?" she asked. "Keisha is ruthless," Noor said, with a tone that clearly meant she was grateful for this. "She makes me do things I'm not sure I can do, and then I do them. And she writes something in her notebook and doesn't celebrate, and then makes me do the next thing." She paused. "I think I might be a little bit scared of her." "That sounds effective," Maya said. "Yeah." Noor looked at her hands, at the left hand that was opening and closing with approaching normality, at the right hand where 3 fingers were moving and 2 were still learning. She looked at them with the particular attention of someone studying something that is simultaneously her own and newly re-encountered. "Can I ask you something?" "Yes. When you found that article, was it luck, or were you looking for it?" Maya thought about this carefully. It was a question she had been asking herself in various forms since the beginning. "Son, I was looking for something else," she said. "I was looking for information about my grandmother's condition. The article was in the wrong place. Someone had left it as a bookmark and forgotten it. If I hadn't been reading that particular journal at that particular time, I wouldn't have found it." "So it was luck." "Partly," Maya said. "But I had been reading for 3 weeks because I was trying to understand something. And I was reading carefully enough to understand what I found. And I kept it instead of throwing it away because I thought it might matter to someone." She paused. "I don't know what part of that is luck and what part is something else." Noor looked at her for a long moment. "You're 8, she said. "I know," Maya said. "How does an 8-year-old from East Baltimore read clinical research and understand it?" Maya thought about Grandma Loretta, asleep in the waiting room with her reading glasses on. She thought about the library on Orleans Street, which she had been going to since she was 4 years old, first carried, then walked, then taking the bus alone when Grandma decided she was old enough for the route. She thought about the particular quality of the library in the early mornings, before the after-school crowd arrived, when it was quiet, and the shelves went on for what seemed like forever in every direction. "My grandmother always said that books don't care who reads them," Maya said. "They say the same things to everyone. The information doesn't change based on who's asking." Noor was quiet. "I grew up in a house where we didn't have much," Maya continued. "But we had library cards. We always had library cards." She paused. "And the library has everything." Noor looked at the east window, where the afternoon light was coming in sideways, the way November light does in Baltimore, lower and longer than summer light, more deliberate. "My dad wants to do something," she said. "For you. He keeps asking me how he should ask you." "I know," Maya said. "He told me he was thinking about it. He's not sure how to. He should just ask," Maya said. "I'm 8, not complicated." Noor made a sound, the first time, in all the weeks of Saturday visits, that she had laughed like that. "Full and sudden and real?" Tariq asked in the family lounge, with Grandma Loretta present, because Maya had said to just ask, and because he understood instinctively that with Grandma Loretta you did things the right way or you didn't do them. Grandma Loretta was a small woman with large hands and the very specific kind of dignity that comes from decades of making do without losing self-respect. She had heard about the events of the past weeks in the way that Grandma Loretta heard about things, gradually, with questions inserted at strategic moments, until she had the complete picture. She had not commented extensively. She had said, "All right, and I see, and is that so?" in tones that communicated everything while appearing to communicate nothing. She was drinking the tea that Dawood had brought. She had said thank you in the tone that accepted the gesture without making a production of it. Tariq sat across from them both and said what he wanted to say. He wanted to fund Maya's education, completely, from where she was now through whatever level she chose to pursue, a foundation account, accessible when she was ready for college or university, with enough in it that cost was never a factor in any decision she made about what to study or where to go. He wanted to cover everything, tuition, housing, materials, living expenses, at whatever institution accepted her. He also wanted, before that, to fund something for her now. a place in a gifted education program in Baltimore that Dr. Osi had told him existed, and that had a waiting list 2 years long for children from families without the resources to navigate the application. He had made inquiries. There was a way to accelerate the process if the resources were there. He said this carefully and without flourish. He said it in the tone of a man who was making a business proposition and also knew it was not a business proposition. When he finished, Grandma Loretta was quiet for a moment. "Why?" she said. "Because she found something that my resources couldn't find," he said, "and because she used it to help someone she didn't know, and because that kind of mind should have access to every door that exists." Grandma Loretta looked at him. She had the look she used when she was assessing whether something was real. "My granddaughter," she said, "is 8 years old and reads textbooks for fun and has been reading about my medical condition for 3 weeks without telling me." She paused. "I already know what she is. What I need to know is what you're asking for in return." "Nothing," Tariq said. "Nobody gives nothing," Grandma Loretta said, not unkindly. "What do you get?" He was quiet for a moment. Then, honestly, the feeling that I didn't walk away from something that mattered, that I recognized what I was looking at when it was in front of me. He paused. "I almost didn't. I almost walked away from a child in a waiting room. And that would have been the worst decision of my life." Grandma Loretta looked at him for a long time with the look that assessed. Then she looked at Maya. "Baby," she said, "what do you want?" Maya had been sitting very still through the whole conversation. She had listened to Tariq's proposal with the same attention she gave to everything, and she had been thinking. "I want 2 things, she said. Tariq nodded. "I want to go to the gifted programmer," she said. "I've been trying to get in for 2 years, but the wait list costs more to navigate than we have." "Done," Tariq said. "And I want something else." She paused. "The library on Orleans Street, the one where I found the article. It's losing funding, the city is cutting the hours, and one of the evening programs that helps kids with homework is being cut because there's no money to staff it. I looked it up after Mr. Al-Sayed told me he wanted to do something." Tariq looked at her. "I want the library to stay open," Maya said. "The full hours, the homework program, I found everything I know in that building. Other kids use it the same way. If it cuts hours, the kids who need it most are the ones who lose access." She looked at him steadily. "That's what I want. The library." Grandma Loretta made a sound that was very quiet, and that she covered by taking a sip of tea. But Maya had known Grandma Loretta her whole life and knew that sound. It was the sound of being surprised by your own granddaughter, which Grandma Loretta still experienced, despite all available evidence that she should have stopped being surprised years ago. Tariq was quiet for a moment. "The library," he said. "The Orleans Street branch of the Baltimore City Public Library," Maya said. "It would need operating funding for at least 3 years to stabilize its position in the city budget. I looked up how city library funding works. 3 years of supplemental endowment is usually enough to get a branch to a point where it can advocate for its own budget line effectively." "You looked up how city library funding works," Tariq said. "Last week," Maya said. "I figured you would ask, and I wanted to have a specific answer." He was quiet for a moment longer. Then he said, "The library and the education fund." "Yes. Both. Yes." He looked at Grandma Loretta, who was looking at Maya with the expression of someone who has long since stopped trying to predict what the next thing will be. "Both," Tariq said. "Done." The Orleans Street branch of the Baltimore City Public Library had been open since 1957. It was a brick building, 1 story, with windows that let in more light than the building deserved credit for, given that the surrounding buildings blocked the sun from 2 directions. It had a children's section, with a mural on the wall that a local artist had painted in 1992, and that had been touched up 3 times since, and which showed, in bright colors, children of several different backgrounds reading beneath a tree that grew improbably large across the whole wall. Maya had been going there since she was 4 years old. The librarian who had first helped her find books was a woman named Mrs. Graves, Dorothy Graves, who was 57 and had been at that branch for 20 years, and who had the quality that the best librarians have, an absolute absence of condescension about what a person chooses to want to know. Mrs. Graves had given Maya her first library card. She had recommended the first chapter books she was old enough to read on her own. She had, 3 months ago, helped her find the neuroscience reference section and shown her where the medical journals were shelved and said only, "These are pretty dense. Let me know if you need help with anything," and then let her alone. She had not known about the article. Maya had found that one herself. On a Saturday afternoon in December, 2 months after the surgery and 6 weeks into the stimulation protocol, Mrs. Graves was staffing the reference desk when a car that she didn't recognize pulled up to the library. Not a library car, something private, something that belonged to a different kind of life than the one that usually drove down Orleans Street. A man got out, then a woman, then a girl in a green jacket who Mrs. Graves recognized immediately. The man walked in and asked to speak to the branch director. Mrs. Graves was the senior staff member on duty, and she said she could help, and the man introduced himself and told her why he was there, and Mrs. Graves looked from him to the girl in the green jacket and then back. "This is because of Maya," she said. "This is because of Maya," the man said. Mrs. Graves looked at Maya, who was looking at the mural on the children's section wall with the expression of someone who has been in a room so many times that they see it differently now, not more familiarly, but more precisely, the way you see things when they matter more. "The homework program is staying," Tariq said, "and the evening hours, the foundation will handle the funding for the next 5 years. 5 years. He had said 3 years in the meeting. He had, at some point, decided on 5. Mrs. Graves put her hand over her mouth for a moment. Then she collected herself with the composure of someone who had spent 20 years helping people find the things they were looking for, and said thank you in the voice of someone who meant it more completely than thank you usually covers. Maya walked over to the children's section and stood in front of the mural for a moment. The children under the tree, the impossible tree that covered the whole wall in colors that had been touched up 3 times. She had looked at this mural more times than she could count. She had sat below it doing homework. She had sat below it reading textbooks. She had, probably, sat below it on the day she found the journal with the article folded inside it. She heard Mrs. Graves and Tariq talking behind her. She heard her grandmother's voice, warmer now than it had been in the formal meeting, asking Mrs. Graves how long she'd been at this branch. She looked at the mural and thought about the article, and about Noor's fingers, and about the window that had been 18 days and was now closed. The window they had made it through in time. She thought about what happens to windows you don't make it through in time. There were other windows, other people who didn't know about them yet. Other articles in other libraries that nobody had read yet or connected to the right person yet. She was 8. She was going to the gifted program in January. She had, somewhere in her head, the beginning of an idea that she didn't have words for yet, something about the distance between what was known and what was applied, between the research published in journals and the patients who needed it, and the space between those two things where something like Maya could, if it was in the right place at the right time, make a connection. She didn't have words for it yet, but she was 8, and she had time, and she had a library that was going to stay open. She turned around. "Can we stay a while?" she asked Grandma Loretta. "I want to check out a book." Grandma Loretta looked at her, the look that had, once, been the look of what now, and had slowly become the look of course you do. "Go ahead, baby," she said. Meanwhile, across the city, 2 people were also part of this story who had never met Maya Collins and might never meet her, but whose lives were being changed by the same event. The first was a boy named Marcus Webb, Jr. He was 11. He lived in West Baltimore, and he had been attending the homework help program at a public library. Not Orleans Street, but the Enoch Pratt on Cathedral, which was connected to the same funding network that Tariq's contribution was quietly shoring up at the city level, because Tariq's advisors had, at his direction, structured the donation to benefit the entire branch system's evening programming, not just Orleans Street alone. Marcus had been using the homework program for 7 months to get help with math. He was significantly behind grade level because of 2 years of inconsistent schooling during a family crisis. And he had a gift for spatial reasoning that no standardized test had ever captured, because the tests he'd taken didn't ask those questions. The homework program had a volunteer tutor, a retired engineer named Mr. Torres, who showed up on Wednesday evenings, who had been showing Marcus geometry problems, not as school problems but as construction problems, and Marcus had been responding. The program was scheduled to cut Wednesday evenings in January. It didn't cut Wednesday evenings. Marcus kept going on Wednesdays. Mr. Torres kept coming. 2 years later, Marcus would win a state competition in technical drawing that he entered on Mr. Torres's suggestion, and the prize included a scholarship to a summer engineering program that would change the direction of his life in ways neither of them could predict in December, when the Wednesday evenings were quietly saved. The second person was a woman named Denise Park. She was 38, a nurse at Johns Hopkins who had been following the progress of the stimulation protocol in Noor's case with professional interest. She had heard about Maya from a colleague. The details had circulated among the nursing staff with the speed that unusual things circulate in hospitals, which is fast and thorough, and she had been thinking about it for weeks. Denise had a brother. He was 32. He had a spinal cord injury at L1, L2, not cervical. Lower to your hands from a workplace accident 3 years ago. The article Maya had found was specific to cervical injuries and didn't apply to his case directly, but the existence of the article, the fact that there were research trails that physicians didn't always follow, and that patients and families could ascend if they looked find, had lodged in Denise's mind as an idea she hadn't had before. She went to the library. She started reading. 4 months later, she came to Dr. Osi with a different article, about a different protocol for lower lumbar injuries, at a different institution. She had found it by following citations, the way Maya had described following citations in the waiting room conversation that Denise had heard about third hand and stored as instruction. Dr. Ose read the article. She made a call. Denise's brother was not a perfect candidate. The injury was 3 years old and well outside the ideal window. But there was a protocol. There was a conversation. There was a door that opened where a door had previously been closed because someone had stopped to look. Maya never knew about Marcus Webb Jr. She never knew about Denise Park or Denise's brother. She was 8 years old and going to school and visiting Noor on Saturdays and checking out books from a library that stayed open, and she didn't know the full shape of what she had started. Nobody ever does. 3 years later. The Thursday afternoon science elective at the Baltimore Academy for Gifted Students met in a room on the 3rd floor, with windows that faced east and a long white table down the center where students spread their materials and worked and argued and occasionally made something that hadn't existed before. Maya was 11 now. She had been at the academy for 2.5 years. She still wore her hair in 2 braids, tighter now, more intentional. The way a person's style gets intentional when they stop letting it happen and start deciding. She had grown 1.5 inches and still ran small for her age, which mattered much less in a room where small and large were irrelevant categories. The elective was called Independent Research Pathways. The teacher was a man named Dr. Kofi Asante, a professor from Johns Hopkins who came in on Thursday afternoons as part of a partnership program, and the premise of the elective was simple. Each student picked a research question they genuinely wanted answered and spent the semester trying to find out. Maya's research question was written at the top of her notebook in her careful, small print. What is the gap between published medical research and clinical application? And what factors determine how quickly findings reach patients? Dr. Asante had looked at this question when she submitted it and said, "That's not a middle school question." "I know," Maya had said. "Where did it come from?" She had told him the story. All of it. The waiting room, the grocery receipt, the article found in a library journal, the window that had been 18 days. He had listened without interrupting, which she appreciated. When she finished, he was quiet for a moment. Then he said, "That's your question. That's a real question. Let's find out." She was 5 months into the research. She had a draft of a preliminary paper that Dr. Asante had called structurally sophisticated, and that her English teacher had called kind of terrifying coming from an 11-year-old. She had, through the Hopkins Library access that Academy students were granted, traced the publication to application timeline for 14 clinical research papers across 6 medical specialties. She had found, with consistency that surprised even her, that the average time between initial publication of a significant finding and its routine incorporation into clinical practice was 17 years. 17 years. She had written that number down in her notebook 3 times to make sure she was reading it right. 17 years between a paper that could change how a doctor treated a patient and the moment when most doctors actually changed. 17 years of windows. 17 years of people who needed something that existed but hadn't been handed to them yet. She was still thinking about what to do with that number. On the last Saturday of November, Tariq came to Baltimore. He came once or twice a year now, partly for the foundation board meetings that had grown from a simple donation into a more structured operation supporting 3 library systems and 2 gifted education programs in underserved communities across Maryland, and partly because Noor had asked him to bring her. Noor was 22 now. She was studying marine biology at the University of Maryland, having transferred from Miami after the accident and found a program in College Park that worked with her circumstances, a campus that was more accessible, a department that had accommodated what she needed. She used a power wheelchair for longer distances. She used a manual chair for shorter ones. She had recovered over 3 years of intensive rehabilitation, near full function in both arms and hands, partial function in her torso and core, and limited but real voluntary movement in her upper legs that her physical therapist Keisha, who had stayed with her through all of it, described as well outside what the initial prognosis suggested. Not full recovery, not the life before the accident exactly, but a life that was hers, moving, engaged, full of things she had chosen. She was working on her senior thesis about reef ecosystems in the Chesapeake Bay. She kept a tank in her apartment with 3 fish she'd named after her doctors. Dr. Whitfield was a small, self-important pufferfish. Dr. Osei was an angelfish who moved through the water with effortless authority. The largest fish in the tank, an iridescent blue tang, was named Maya. Maya knew about the fish. She found it slightly embarrassing and entirely perfect. On the last Saturday of November, Noor drove up from College Park with Tariq, and they met Maya and Grandma Loretta and Mrs. Graves from the library for lunch at a restaurant in Charles Village, a round table by the window, October light on the Baltimore street outside, the particular warmth of a group of people who have been connected by something that none of them can fully explain, but all of them understand. Grandma Loretta's tremor had been diagnosed. Parkinson's, early stage, manageable with medication and monitoring. She was 3 years into a treatment protocol that her neurologist at the community health clinic had recommended, and she was doing well in the way that doing well means when you are doing well with something hard. Her hands still shook sometimes. She still worked one job. She had finally let the second one go. She had, at Maya's persistent suggestion and Tariq's financial support, seen a specialist who had adjusted her medication in a way that made the mornings easier. She was sitting at the round table with her tea, which she could hold steadily most days, and she was looking at the group around her with the expression she had when she was feeling something she wasn't going to put into words. Tariq was talking to Mrs. Graves about the second year of the evening programs. The numbers were good. Participation was up. There was a proposal to expand the homework help to weekend mornings. Noor was showing Maya something on her tablet, underwater footage she'd taken the previous week, a patch of seagrass in the Chesapeake that she was documenting as part of her thesis data. The fish moved through the frame on Noor's tablet, slow and indifferent and extraordinary, going about the business of being alive. Maya watched them. She thought about her notebook upstairs in her bag, and the 17-year number and the question she had been carrying for 3 years now, the question that had been the receipt and the article and the window and the finger moving and the library staying open, and now was becoming something else, something with edges and a shape, something that might eventually become an answer or at least a better question. She was 11. She had time. She looked at Noor. She looked at Grandma Loretta, who was holding her tea with steady hands this morning. She looked at Mrs. Graves, who was laughing at something Tariq had said, the laugh of someone who had spent 20 years helping people find what they were looking for and knew in this specific moment what it felt like to be one of the things found. She looked at all of it, and then she looked back at the fish on the screen. Deep water, circuits waiting for a signal. A line dropped at exactly the right moment. She picked up her pencil. Somewhere in this city, and in your city, and in every city, there is a child with a library card and a question. There is a book on the wrong shelf, a paper left as a bookmark and forgotten, a window with 18 days that nobody has found yet. Tell me in the comments, do you know a child like Maya, someone who reads things they're not supposed to understand yet, Who connects things that aren't supposed to connect? Who asks questions that make adults look at each other? Tag them, name them, let them know someone sees it, and share this story with someone who needs to hear that knowledge doesn't check the address you grew up in, that libraries are doors, not buildings, that the most important information sometimes arrives in the smallest voice, from the most unexpected direction. Where in the world are you watching from? Let me know. The window might still be open.